Hi, June 11th, 2023, MikeRatner.com. So I just really sort of picked up the phone, which I'm recording on right now, to sort of just quickly check in because it had been a little while, and technically a month before my birthday. I had in the past, and it's amazing how many years. I mean, we're talking about maybe starting this as an early teen. Sort of reflect on the year that had just passed, and because my birthday's in July, talking about me, my birthday. It's sort of a half year from January, so I'm a big New Year's success kickoff type of guy. Get excited about that New Year. Not so much the party, but more the to get into a success program. That would be the ideal success club. Anyway, that kind of fades by February, particularly by Valentine's Day, right? Most of your goals and New Year resolutions get broken and messed up. But now coming to a birthday point in half a year, it's kind of like a reboot, like birthdays, anniversaries, those type of things. So you can't make it a festive day. But, if you're in the wealth slosh, in which I'm going to talk about, someone's going to say, wait, what is this I'm listening to? Anyway, my name's MikeRatner.com, and this is part of Mike'sMastermind.com. And even though I have recorded, it's probably been a couple of weeks since I uploaded, which, given amazing years of doing this for decades, making recordings, to finally start uploading, that is a paradigm shift. Man, there's been a lot of years going back of recordings. These were like digital journals that were required for my graduate study at the Western Institute for Social Research, WISR.edu. Yeah, the wiser place to study, which allowed me the freedom to kind of engage in this, what I call Gedenkens, which technically is a real German word for thought experiments. And the Welt Slash is sort of my recent undertaking, and it's really just been since the beginning of the year, so it's a baby. But related to my pseudo philosophy, where you can get tidbits at grandtourideas.com. Yes, did he say grandtourideas.com? Yes, he did. We better check it out. So this Walt Slash engagement being the newest of that collection of ideas, samplings of which you can find at grandtourideas.com. Haven't you gone there yet? This is sort of a check-in as the digital journals would go, and sort of how am I doing. And a lot of these were done when I was living in Shanghai, China. But I hadn't yet formatted where things are at with this concept of Weltschloss, which I'll come back to, which technically is the German word for, that I made up, for world dwelling. And it's the ontological perspective here. In a philosophy of ultra being, what is it to be in the here and now? Fully awake, conceptually these are things that get explored. And it began with these roots of my study at the Western Institute for Social Research, because at that point in time I wanted my dissertation to be about awakening into one's full potential, to self-actualization, like on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow was the first humanist psychologist. In fact, some people credit him for sort of taking the position of just what's wrong with you in psychology to what would it be like if we could imagine or aspire or study those that have achieved success, had a healthy, lifestyle, you could say, happy. Just reading an article today about Finland, still the number one happiest country in the world. I'll put a link on that because I was just sharing that earlier to check out. So the concept of ultra being is what drives me in looking at this idea. And my first idea for the dissertation, which you have to write this thesis in order to graduate and get out of, school. Got a doctorate in higher ed, PhD. 12 years, that's all it took. Off and on, coming back to it, getting well sloshed out, which I'll come back to. The idea here, though, is that we could be a bit more attuned and awakened in our way of being. There'll be another level of interaction that would allow for the possibility of better relationships, more quote-unquote success in the realm, but something that's really good for the whole, that serves humanity. And if we could model this, study it, and ideal it, we might be able to deconstruct it and re-engineer, or just sort of wake up into sort of a natural premise that things are good all along if we're sort of tapped into the source. The source could be spirit for you, or just this ideal of, what would this be, ultra being? Being at your best, being in flow, managing your state, and having a consistency sort of on this quote-unquote cosmic level of consciousness to where you're really attuned to whatever this is. So for me, that's like this cosmic connection, and so I explore it. Not to say that I know it or own it, and certainly not a master of it, yet I'm aspiring. And this type of mastery is only available in the moment. You have to be here and now. So the idea was that, or the premise of this dissertation was called mass trance, because my view or perspective on society had been like this, going back to the 80s, was like, I represent some kind of rebellious take on things that I don't really want to quite accept the status quo. Things could be better. And of course, with me aspiring to whatever, graduating or never eventually ever getting a real job or establishing a career, but you have some good ideas, it's like, well, how do you put it in the perspective to where it's functional for you? And if you've got other responsibilities like a career or family, kids, financial obligations or whatever, just keeping a clean house could be a challenge for some. So we have this, right? This moment to define mastery. And if there was a point of awakening, it would be from the mass trance. Yes, the hypnosis of society. And it exists out there. So I hope you can share this and reflect on this to a degree to where we all could have a little bit more introspection into how we're being in the moment. Because if we're not in the moment, we must be in the mass trance, right? You're projecting things that are just far out there, aspersions, things that are made up. But they're existing continuously in people's minds. I call these RTPs. RTPs are repeated thought patterns. And if we're not awake or attuned to them, then we're outside of sort of reality, right? We're something that, is sort of like, it's giving you a chance for introspection right now. And this is refinement, ultra being, mastery in the moment, where they're just, you're awake. And awakeness to this level, to me, as I study it, seems to be an emptiness. It's Deepak Chopra, which is another article he just wrote today. So I saw this on CNBC, but it's an article. So I'll put that link on there too. I'm obligated to share stuff. And it's not like I'm reading all this stuff. It's sort of, I find ideas, I acquire them. But man, I have some serious ADD, so I never quite get through my projects, Great ideas, and that could include reading. But I'm sort of guided in a way where I sort of pick up elements here and there because I observe. And this is mastery in the moment. And if you can have this emptiness, and as you practice this present momentness, you have it. So a lot of it is what I call in the T.W.A. And Dr. Job called this I-awareness, and I sort of expand this. It's like you'd say, like, people search for awareness. The illusion is that it's out there. When it's I-awareness, this would bring mastery. And it's only available in the present moment. Where else would you be with it? Sort of just this idea of being present. So what would you be present to? Well, if one's empty, one can fully observe, because as soon as we start getting into this particular pattern, the flight that we take every day, we have to really be careful or aware of how we guide it. So the new word came into being that was just what Dr. Job called I-awareness. And I said, why don't we just shorten instead of I-awareness, I-awareness, we just create a new word called I-awareness. He wasn't as excited about my passion for creating new words because he thought it'd just add to the added to it all. Could be confusion or just sort of like the lexicon of life, that there'd be all these new words. And from my take on it, it's a contemplation and a study to come into something that represents a new realization. And it comes back to how we're present in the moment. So the flight we take every day is what is, I say, T.W.A, which was an airline of long ago that went out of business. But T.W.A, as an acronym for me, represented that we would have a little bit more conscious attunement of this moment mastery. And it began with our thoughts. What the heck am I thinking? What are your thoughts? Are they RTPs, repeated thought patterns? And are you attuned to them? Because you would think as soon as you would sort of dissipate and dissolve whatever it would be that was sort of the obstruction. The challenges are good because they are lessons, and they represent things in a way of learning that when we adopt them, and as we apply them in the moment, we no longer trip up in the repeated thought patterns of the past. The RTPs dissipate because once you sort of have an attention to them, you make a choice in that moment. Do I continue to repeat having them? RTPs, repeated thought patterns, or am I able to just let it go? That's the mastery of the moment. You just let it go. Happy Face had some, which is the tribal quote-unquote spirit name. It's a totem, like a totem pole, and there's aspirations of different levels that in my work I unmask or unreveal, because the mask or the mass trance is obscuring sort of just a simple appreciation of here and now. And the here and now has to begin, and this reflects on Weltslash, the world that we're dwelling in, begins with my thoughts, because it's my perception of things. Now, truly, I found mastering the moment to sort of be really empty, almost devoid of thoughts. You have a knowingness, so you can tap into anything in the flash of an instant, so there's no worry about it. Knowledge is available. It's all around us, man. You can just do what I'm doing on the phone right now. Tap into it. So yeah, is there some genius here? Perhaps. It's the study of what ultra beingness and the potential of waking up in the moment begins with Iwareness. What are my thoughts? Now, you kind of drill and dive in. You divine, which is filter. Something a bit deeper here, which is like, what is the quality of my communication? The words that I'm using. And it's not my projections outwardly toward you, which I have a separate writing about called IGO, I-G-O, where I go in my mind. igoism.com, igoism.com. Man, that's a whole new take, separate from ego. How come we've never named the selfie of the mind, which is how we picture ourselves, and also how we describe ourselves? So communication to ourselves and the words that we use, what we say about ourselves, about our perceived reality, which I say in the mass trance, for most people is just a morbid noun reality. So what's known to them is people, places, and things. And the words they describe about them, right? It reveals the Weltslash. So I'm having a thought was my first perception. What's revealed to me is then described to me through my T.W.A, thoughts, words, and actions. T.W.A, thoughts, words, and actions. How am I acting? How am I showing up in this regard of my thoughts? The words that I'm using? Holy sh! So past presentations haven't taught you that, whoa, it didn't work right before. Why would I continue that diatribe now? You know, it's sort of like you make the choice. You've come to a realization in the Weltslash of the world that I've created and I'm dwelling in. Moment mastery is going to allow me something. What's it going to allow you? Well, for me, it's to actualize. So through my thoughts, words, and actions, what am I actualizing? Well, my act, right? How am I acting? Sometimes, and most often, actions do speak louder than words. Great ideas, but doesn't take any action. He says he's going to do this and does the wrong action. Or action, reaction. And now you're here in the Weltslash. But because you're able to wake up to the world that we're dwelling in, thoughts do manifest to some degree. At least you're living and experiencing them. And this is the Weltslash, the world that I'm dwelling in. Yeah, it's a unique concept and a worldview. Yeah, it could be sort of this breakthrough ultra-being philosophy. Could be a self-liberation movement where we wake up from our own stories. Or the meta-narrative, the things that are said through society, the trends, the fashions, the media, right? So the narrative sort of is like, well, you know, it's definitely projected in and out. You know, I call it a reverberation, you know, because it's sort of like we might have heard something and reacted to it, and it could have just been made up in our minds because we're other than aware of our thoughts, and then we reflected that in the words that we're using or confirming that, this and that through our actions and the way we act. And no wonder it's a RTP, repeated thought pattern, because it's a cycle. So now it's a cycle we can break. And yeah, in the past, man, it was ugly. Man, things did not work out. Or perhaps they did to some level, but it wasn't sufficient or enough for you or for the people who had the expectations. And these expectations are well-deserved, right? If you, through your thoughts, words, and actions, made a promise or said you were going to be this way or that way and you didn't come through, well, if that's edging you or bugging you, or there's some reverberation because something is unresolved, there hasn't been a solution for it, you haven't connected on this level yet, well, then it's time. And as a teacher, and my God, to wear that plaque around my neck, I do not feel comfortable in it. But I do feel I can be an exemplar, because the formula for ultra being is really simply is to have the beginning